So welcome everyone. We will start in about 1 or 2 minutes just to let the time for our attendees to click on join. Perfect. So I guess we can start. So first of all, I want to say a big and sincere thank you to our panelists who have accepted to join us today for, I hope, a very interesting discussion about the role of the private sector in protecting the environment and meeting our country's environmental goals. We will have around 30 minutes of discussion between the panelists, then 10 minutes of questions from the public to the panelists. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you will have Q&A. So that's where you can ask your questions during that session. I'm sure participants will be glad to hear that we have with us today Kate Lindsay. She's the Vice President of the Forest Products Association of Canada. We also have Bob Larocque, President and CEO of the Canadian Fuels Association. We have Pierre Gratton, President and CEO of the Mining Association of Canada. And finally, we have Isabelle Des Chênes, Executive Vice President of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada. I would like also to highlight the incredible help of the Chemistry Industry Association and Sophie Normand for the organization of this panel, which would not have been possible without their work. Last, thank you, but not the least, we are honored to have with us today more than 80 participants that took their personal time to hear us talk for an hour. So thank you for joining us, and we really wish we could meet you in person instead of Zoom, maybe next year, who knows. Before we start this panel and let the panelists say a few words, let me introduce myself. My name is Miguel Ouellet. I am the Director of Operations and Economist at the Montreal Economic Institute. I've been working with the MEI for over 4 years now, first as a research associate, then as an economist, and finally as my current role now. I hold a master's degree in economics from the University of Toronto, and I also currently teach macroeconomics at HEC Montreal. It's a pleasure for me to be the moderator of this panel today, and a pleasure for the Montreal Economic Institute, the MEI, to have co-organized this event with CIAC. For those of you who might not have heard about the MEI that much, we are an independent think tank based in Montreal. We tackle pan-Canadian issues related to public finances, healthcare, natural resources development, and much more. To link our work with the topic of this panel, I would say it's in our vision that Canada would benefit from a freer economy where entrepreneurs are given the tools to succeed. And when it comes to the protection of the environment, we truly believe that the private sector has an important role to play, and that policymakers and the general population should be aware of what our businesses have accomplished in terms of reducing GHG emissions in the last decades and what they intend to do in the future. So we believe our country really needs environmental solutions emerging from the private sector and the market if we don't want to compromise our freedom, our standards of living, and if we want our economy to keep growing. So that's the vision of this panel. So enough talking for me. I will let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with our co-organizer, Madame Isabelle Des Chênes from CIAC. Thank you, Isabelle.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Chemistry Industry Association of Canada represents close to 100 members, and the focus of our discussion today will be on the fact that we're at we're seeing two great transformations within our sector, but also within Canadian manufacturing, and that's industrial net zero transformation and a transformation to a circular economy, and chemistry solutions are going to be a big part of that. So happy to discuss that with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabelle. We can go now to Kate Lindsay from the Forest Products Association of Canada.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kate Lindsay, Senior Vice President at FPAC, and want to extend a huge thank you to MEI and the Chemistry Association for the opportunity to be here today. Very honored to join these other panelists. A lot of respect for the folks here today. FPAC, Forest Products Association of Canada, represents most of the large integrated forest management companies and manufacturer of forest products across Canada. We're very focused on transition to a net zero economy and the role that the forest sector can provide in helping Canada meet its targets. There's significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that have already been made to date, but there's more that can be done. So, really excited to join this discussion today. What is our role in the transition to net zero, as well as how do we provide some of those other values around biodiversity, Indigenous participation in the sector, and moving forward together. So thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, Kate. Now we can go to Bob Larocque from the Canadian Fuels Association.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Special thanks again to Miguel and MEI and also Isabelle and CIAC. Really happy to be here today and share. And it's nice also to see previous colleague. I used to work with Isabelle and Kate, so it's nice that we're tag teaming this, and Pierre. I'm Bob Larocque, President and CEO of the Canadian Fuels Association. We represent refining industry all the way down to gas stations, so including terminals. We're also the biggest producer of biofuels in Canada. And what I want to talk about today and with the team here is again, transition to net zero. We fully support the government net zero goal objective, and we have a lot of work to do. So both at the refining and all the way down to transportation fuels, and we need to collaborate. So looking forward to the conversation today and explaining what we'll be doing.
Thank you, Bob. Pierre Gratton from the Mining Association of Canada.
Yes, hi. So I'm President and CEO of the Mining Association of Canada. Been in this role now for, I guess, 10 years, but I've been in the mining world for over 20 now. So a key focus for our sector these days is the whole mines to mobility challenge that the government of Canada has defined, where our products are essential to the electrification of our automotive sector, for example. We are privileged and I think blessed in Canada to have, by and large, an abundance of clean power across the country, such that we produce some of the lowest carbon content nickel and cobalt in the world. So there's a huge opportunity for Canada to increase the production of those materials, knowing that if we do so here, we're actually helping fight climate change, as opposed to other parts of the world where such production has higher carbon content. So we represent most of Canada's mineral production in the country, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Pierre. So we'll start right away with the questions. Bob, you talked about Canada's net zero goals. So sometimes we think that, I guess some people might believe that the oil and gas sector have sometimes bad press. And if we were to ask you, what specifically is the transportation fuel sector doing to support Canada's net zero goals, and to tell us a bit about your driving to 2050 vision?
Thanks a lot, Miguel, and very good question. So about a year ago, we launched Driving to 2050, and this is our vision of how the transportation sector, and we say fuels right now, but I think, Miguel, over time, it might be energy, and how we can get there. So that includes all kinds of aspect of it. Then one is reducing our emission at the refining sector, and now we're talking about carbon capture and storage, energy efficiency, but also down the transportation fuel use, where we're looking at hydrogen, we're looking at low carbon fuels, either ethanol, renewable diesel, co-processing feedstock from agriculture and forestry waste, for example, in our refineries, but also electric. So it's a suite of all of those potential low carbon fuels that we see we need for 2050. There's not one silver bullet. And on that one, we're very pleased. We announced actually a week ago that last year, as a quick update, but we had more than $5 billion of announcement, and we're already 7 megatons of reductions announced on our way to there's like 80 megatons, I think, in a light duty vehicle emissions to tackle. So more work to do, Miguel, but we're a pretty good start in year one, and we're looking forward to working with the partners around here, to be honest with you, because we can't do it alone.
Excellent. And when you talk about reducing GHG emissions, we might want to think about electric vehicles. Yep. So Pierre, can you tell us a bit about the new technologies in your sector that help reduce GHG emissions? Because I guess it would be linked also to electrification of transport, right?
Well, yeah, there's a range of different battery technologies that use different metals, but metals are essential to those, to all of them, whether it be lithium, nickel, cobalt. There's also opportunities in hydrogen, not a metal solution, but there's multiple pathways to reducing the emissions coming from the transportation sector. A lot of them require metals. What's also, of course, a challenge to our sector is to produce those metals with as low a carbon footprint as possible. And we're seeing, I think, a lot of important steps taken towards that. We've now got 2 underground mines in Canada that are fully electric. We've a 3rd in construction. We've got, members across the country deploying all sorts of different renewable technologies to reduce their carbon footprint, so that we're actually mining these materials with less carbon and then making them available for use in battery technology. So it's it's been estimated that we're going to need some 3 billion more tons of minerals and metals to electrify the world's transportation fleets. That's a huge volume. We don't know where we're going to find it yet. So we have to find these materials, we have to mine them, and we have to do so responsibly to minimize the footprint on the planet so that we can actually achieve our goals. So it's a huge task ahead of us, but obviously one that we have to take, as I think we all know, just watching the discussions coming out of Glasgow, and as we all sort of live the effects of climate change from year to year.
Excellent. And when you talk about having new mines, the first question that comes to my head is saying, when a company is done with mining, what happens to the site? Do we just let it there, or is there something else that happens?
That used to be the case.
Exactly.
A few decades ago. Environmental awareness, has grown in our sector, as it has across every panel members' sectors over the last number of decades. So it's now not an option. It's every provincial and territorial government will have requirements, both before a project is even built. You'll have to have a closure plan. You will have some kind of financial mechanism to ensure that if a company goes bankrupt, if that happens, it doesn't happen very often, but were it to happen, there would be financial securities in place to ensure the proper closure of that mine site. So it's now in our industry, you plan for closure right from the very beginning. You have closure plans that are submitted to provincial authorities and that are, updated every 5 years. And companies will engage in what we call progressive reclamation. So you will start reclaiming from the moment you start having an impact on the land. You will restore as you go. That's a very effective way of managing your exposure and keeping your costs down. So now it's just a way of doing business, and it's one that's widely accepted across the industry, at least in this country, in our country.
All right, thank you. So I guess there are a few innovations, or a lot of innovations in the mining sector. And if we go to the forestry sector, Kate, can you tell us a little bit about the innovations right now that are going on to help reduce the GHG emissions?
Absolutely, and it's a great question, and it's happening throughout the value chain. So in the forests, in the manufacturing of products, and in the transportation of those products as well. Forest sector was an early adopter of greenhouse gas emissions. So the manufacturing facilities in Canada have already reduced greenhouse gas emissions by Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHG emissions by 65% and 45% respectively since 1990. And that's largely through the use of renewables and bioenergy. there's more that can be done, and we're excited about the opportunity for net negative emissions, so bioenergy use, carbon capture and storage in the future. And then we also, manage forests, and forests have the ability to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and store it, which is a pretty amazing thing. But Canada is also prone to impacts of climate change, particularly with wildfires and forest pest outbreaks, which we've seen. So Canada's forests emit carbon when those natural disturbances take place. So the forest sector also has the ability to help build resiliency into those ecosystems moving forward, so they can continue to sequester carbon, and lots of exciting innovations around something called assisted migration, helping to plant more adapted trees that will be better adapted to the climate of the future. So trees that might be more drought resistant or forest pest resistant moving forward. And then how we work with other sectors and whole of society to increase resiliency, whether it's thinning the forest to reduce fuel loading, helping communities stay safer from catastrophic wildfire. And then the beauty is also using that wood residue to optimize for its best purpose, whether that's lumber, whether that's mass timber, tall wood buildings, or whether it's working with Bob's sector to help build have woody biomass going into to create biofuels and bioenergy moving forward. So there's really a lot of opportunities. Those innovations have started, and it's really about making sure that there's policy and programs and funding opportunities that really allow those to continue and have Canada continue to be a leader in this space.
Great. So Kate gave a lot of examples of what the forestry sector is doing. So if we go to you, Isabelle, do you have some examples of what the chemistry industry is doing and what solutions you might want to suggest to fight climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of people, they don't really understand the chemistry sector, and our products are largely invisible to them. But one of the key things to understand is that 95% of all manufactured products rely on chemistry in one form or another. So we do provide those sort of base foundational pieces that allow other products and solutions to be delivered. And so we are looking at a number of processes to help reduce our own emissions, and similar to Kate, we've been able to reduce those by about 65-67% since 1990 levels, which has been tremendous given the size of the manufacturing sectors. We also do a lot of work around, we take advantage of Canada's natural advantage, which is abundant low carbon feedstocks. And we, unlike other chemistry sectors around the world that continue to use coal or crude oil as inputs, we rely on abundant natural gas that flows through this country, and we extract those liquids to create those products. We rely on biomass, and particularly in Quebec, around our chemistry clusters there, hydroelectricity is a key input. So that really helps to keep our emissions down. We also do because of the cluster activity that we have, it allows us to transfer our outputs, and byproducts can become feedstocks to other industries. So if we're releasing carbon, or carbon dioxide becomes an input to someone who is creating seltzers. And
that, Isabelle, if I'm not mistaken, would be something that we would call the circular economy.
It's part of that circular economy piece, yes. And then just in terms of because we are inputs to other manufacturing sectors, if we look at building and construction, buildings are the built sector is about 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So if you look at innovations around insulation and reflective roofing and vinyl frames, those all help to keep the cooling and energy requirements down for heating and cooling of those structures. Or if you're looking at Bob and Cal talked about renewable energy, and that's really key in terms of the inputs that we can provide for wind and solar. So we're doing a lot of work to help other sectors transform, as well as doing our own transformations and reductions.
Excellent. And I think that the fight against climate change is not all about innovation, but sometimes our government, they use regulations. So Bob, can you tell us a bit about how do the proposed bans on internal combustion vehicles affect your industry?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I wish we had 2 hours or more to talk about this, to be honest with you, because they're all linked. But I think there's 2 or 3 very key pieces of regulations right now that I think affect all of us and individually us. The first one is, yes, the mandate for electric vehicles. There's bans, which is you can't produce an internal combustion engines. Other ones are more of a mandate on the supply side. So we're not sure, Miguel, exactly how it's all going to line up between the province. But at the end of the day, there will be a significant increase of electric vehicles for the light duty vehicles, guaranteed for that. But there's also, like, people sometimes forget, I wasn't on Monday, but hydrogen is also an electric vehicle, right? And we're producers of hydrogen. We're one of the biggest producers of hydrogen in the country, our sector. So it's not necessarily for me about one solution. Like I said, I think when you broaden it up a little bit, there's multiple solutions for part of the electrification. And then, like Pierre was saying, there's a lot going on the materials. Do we need to double the electricity production clean in Canada or not? And we believe that low carbon fuels have a bigger impact than actually creating. And that's why I'm here also today, is I think we need to do a better job in our sector to explain the benefits of biofuels, like, the ethanol, renewable diesel. So we feel that all those solutions are going to be part. And don't forget also, electrification is one step. It's light duty vehicles. We have to think about jet fuel. We have to think about marine fuel. We have to think about heavy duty. And just quickly, a perfect example in Prince George right now, there's waste product, forestry being transformed, going into a refinery in Prince George for renewable diesel, 90% reductions on the carbon intensity of that fuel, and then being sent back to the forestry sector who uses it for their log trucks. So it's just an example of all of us working together, Miguel, on the transportation. So yes, ICE bans are very important to us, but the clean fuel regulation that's coming very shortly is also a very important piece of regulation that will affect everyone on this call.
Exactly. I think that's a good point, and it will affect not only everyone on this call, but also the consumers, right? So yes. Can you talk a bit more about the costs that would be imposed to consumers when we talk about some regulations, some taxes? Is it when we say we are going to tax Irving, when we're going to tax Suncor, are we in fact taxing the company, or are we sometimes taxing consumers? Yeah,
so we have a complex tax mechanism in Canada. So I'll start with the one directly at consumers. So right off the bat, you have an excise tax, and that's on when you use gasoline or diesel. And that's important because if you eliminate gasoline, for example, in electric vehicles, where is that? And that's up to $26 billion a year in taxation that goes to provincial and federal government. So we're going to have to think about that. The second one is the carbon tax that gets applied to directly at gasoline, and that increases up to $170 a ton, and we're going to go up to $50 in April. So that's a direct cost to consumers. Then you have the indirect cost to consumers, which the clean fuel regulation will force changes to the fuel fleet. And that one, the government of Canada has a very good little table and can show people. And the problem why I can't answer your question today, Miguel, it's market-based. So you look at California, it could be around $100 US a ton. BC was 100, 150. Now it's about $500 a ton, those carbon credit. That has an impact on cents per liter, depending on where you're at. So that's an indirect cost. And then lastly, we're all covered by this. It's the carbon pricing on the output-based system, which creates another cost at the manufacturing side. So either you're a pulp mill, you're a refining, or you're a mine. And those, again, is an indirect cost. And that is going up to $170 a ton by 2030. So sorry to answer the questions, but it's complicated, and there's multiple different taxes that impact energy cost.
Excellent.
I want to jump in here.
Sure.
Miguel. It's also, I think what's important too is that there are some sectors that can pass on costs, and there are others like ours that cannot. I mean, we sell our product at international prices. So any sort of tax increase that we have to absorb, direct or indirect, we can't pass it on. We can't, sell to some manufacturing sector that needs nickel or copper. We can't pass on the tax. We just have to, it just goes straight to it erodes our bottom line. So that's a real challenge for sectors such as ours whose prices are set internationally. And then, so when the price of fuel goes up through the different mechanisms that Bob was describing, we just pay that, and we don't get to recover it from anybody else. So now the carbon tax in Canada has been, I think, very elegantly designed. It's designed to protect trade exposed sectors like mining, but the Clean Fuel Standard does not. And so that is going to actually have, particularly for our remote mines that don't have options. I mean, the whole idea is to try to promote alternatives in fuel switching, and that can't work when you're off grid in a remote part of the country where you just don't have alternatives. It's okay for a mine or a refinery or a smelter that's grid connected in southern Canada, that can look at fuel alternatives, that can look at renewables, look at ways of offsetting your consumption of liquid fuels. But otherwise, it's a pretty significant issue for our sector, and we have we've been communicating this to government for some time, not with the greatest success when it comes to the Clean Fuel Standard. So it's a worry.
It's a very good point. And when we talk about the Clean Fuel Standard and sometimes other regulations, the costs are enormous for the industry, but also, as you mentioned, for the consumers. So that's why I think some economists and some entrepreneurs started talking about CCUS, so carbon capture, storage, and utilization. So if I go back to you, Kate, at the beginning, you mentioned that your industry was very good in carbon sequestration. So can you tell a little bit more about this and how it can be linked to technologies that store carbon?
I can, although I must say it's not my area of expertise. In that case, actually, Bob might be able to help me out a little bit. But definitely, I mean, there are options for decarbonization. I mean, there's some really cool examples, even in Resolute and Saint Félicien, Quebec, with Tundra, the cucumber greenhouses, right, where some of that waste heat and CO2 can be used in the greenhouse, which is great because it's also about food security and reducing another sector's greenhouse gas emissions. But then there are other pulp mills in Canada that are looking at more permanent storage of our carbon capture and storage. The technology exists, but it really is around investment in that moving forward, and then doing so in a coordinated fashion. My understanding is there's hubs, in Alberta and BC where we'd have to make sure we tap into those. But my understanding is that those conversations are starting. There's interest, and it is an opportunity for more permanent removals of CO2 moving forward. So yeah, I'll just see if Bob has more to add, but otherwise, there's more that I could follow up with and share with you.
I think Kate nailed it on the head in the sense of where you're at. And I think the infrastructure on CCS is something that, I think the word infrastructure you're going to hear a lot about today, but that's another example where if you're close to the trunk line in Alberta, we have the Redwater refinery doing it already, 1.5 million tons a year of carbon capture and storage. That makes sense. But even for us, when we're looking at it, Miguel, there's 16 refineries in Canada, 4 or 5 in the short term. And when I mean short term, I mean by 2030, we're not talking 2 years here. But when you're looking at, St. John, New Brunswick, you're looking, Montreal, Quebec, those are not easy to just put a CCS on it. And what do you do with it, right? So like Kate said, it needs to make sense, and you need to invest in the right spot. There's some good moves. We have to give the government, you know, they're talking about the CCUS tax credit that's coming in March 2022. Still some consultation going on it, but that will make a difference, I think, on some of the investments you'll see in Canada. And then at some point, I'll touch base a little bit, but I think all of us, the United States is going to be very interesting on what they do in the next year. And for my sector, it's critical. Just an example, we could produce the biofuels in Canada, but if the market in California, you know what I mean, we need to be careful about what's going on cross country too on their incentives. So we're also looking at making sure the Canadian economic environment is similar to the US, because we're all of you were exporters, right? Including we could become exporters too if needed. So just want to share that.
And just to build on Bob's piece, yes, carbon capture utilization storage is excellent. It's great technology, but it's expensive technology. And so having the right investment supports in place, recognizing that industry will make those investments, but having supports in place that allow us to make those investments. So the CCUS tax credit proposal is a really great start in terms of helping to accelerate those kinds of investments that are required.
Yeah, you know, I'd add too, I don't know if people watched the PM yesterday in Glasgow when he did a media scrum, but he was quite good. And when I say by quite good, like he was, through his remarks, emphasizing that we need to keep basically all options on the table, whether it's CCS, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's small modular nuclear reactors, whether it's, you know, batteries. All of these things have to be available. They will make sense in certain locations, in certain geographies. And with time, the technologies are going to improve and the costs are going to improve. I was just reading the other day about Rio Tinto, one of our members, and something they're doing with a partner in Iceland around CCS, which is not just storing it underground, but actually becomes, it actually solidifies. So it's sort of a new technology to permanently capture carbon, not just storing it in wells underground. As all of this advances, it's going to get more and more, I think, doable. But we have to keep all cards on the table, because what's going to work in one place is not going to work in another. And what's going to work for one company is not going to work for another. So the PM was quite good yesterday, I thought, saying exactly that. And we all need to work together on this.
Thank you, Pierre. I think when we talk about CCS and electric vehicles, it's all technologies that people are aware of, but sometimes technologies in sectors are not really known, such as the LiDAR technology in the forestry sector, but it is a very important technology for the protection of the environment. Maybe Kate, if you want to tell us a bit more about the LiDAR technology.
For sure, yeah. And if folks are not aware, it's light detection and ranging. Essentially, an aircraft flies over a forest above the canopy and shoots down a laser and gets very detailed 3D imagery of the forest. It's been around for some time now, but more and more it's being used. It's very high precision inventory of the forest. And because we're such a massive country, this helps Canada and those making decisions about forest management and what use wood fiber is best used for. It just helps them have a more precise picture of the forest out there and how it's growing and how it's likely to grow in the future. So it's a really cool technology that's being used to essentially increase our inventory of the forest. And essentially it helps you understand the density of the forest, the volume of the forest, and even the type of wood fiber. So again, you can just make those strategic decisions about what that fiber is going to be used for in the future. Moving forward. So anyway, and it is really cool in that it can be transferred right into some of the machine operators. So when they're out there working in the forest. They have, you know, very precise information. So better than some of the mapping techniques that we've used decades before. So
I guess it's used by the private companies, but also by governments, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, in case people don't know, you know, 90% of the forest sector in Canada is on Crown land. And so, you know, governments in the past and private industry have both made investments in what's called forest inventory. So, you know, what we're hearing more and more is kind of wall-to-wall LiDAR. So we have a much better inventory, you know, for those government decision makers, our regulator, as well as private sector, and how they're developing forest management plans and how they're making their investment decisions moving forward.
Thank you, Kate. If I go to you, Isabelle, I guess COVID-19 had some effects on your industry, as everyone should know. How do you envision your sector contributing to a more environmentally sustainable innovations in Canada post-COVID?
Well, there are a number of areas where we can make some really positive contributions. One of the things that is really interesting is that I have my little poster, all of our members are committed to something called responsible care. It's chemistry ESG that was developed here in Canada almost 40 years ago and is now practiced in over 70 countries worldwide. And the ethic and principles of responsible care are really quite simple. It's do the right thing and be seen to do the right thing. And that really compels our sector to focus on innovations, but innovations that will allow them to deliver safer and greener products, but also safer processes, and really focused on environmental, social, and health aspects. So it's really constantly looking to improve those areas. And as part of that, the companies are really focused on continual improvement themselves. So recently just last month, we saw an announcement from Dow Chemical and the operations in Alberta. They've announced that they will be delivering or are proposing to deliver the world's first net zero carbon emissions ethylene complex in Fort Saskatchewan. So taking building a new brownfield ethylene cracker, and that will triple their ethylene and polyethylene capacity, but it will also allow them to retrofit the entire site to eliminate carbon dioxide emissions. So that will allow them to, going forward, deliver low carbon made in Canada products. We also have Nova Chemicals and Dow, each in their own on their own efforts and part of their research and development, have now started to introduce post-consumer plastic resins. And in Dow's case, it's 70% post-consumer plastic resins. It means that rather than using virgin resins fully, you're able to use these recycled content resins to create new products. So really capturing and helping to enable that circular economy. We're looking at new investments in Alberta around hydrogen. And our companies, particularly here in Quebec, who are many of them who do hydroelectricity feedstocks, who use those feedstocks to deliver their industrial chemicals, are close to being net zero themselves. They're also producing hydrogen as a byproduct, which allows them to then reuse that as a feedstock and creating that circular approach to integrating the feedstocks. So there are a lot of these processes, and as the other industries are really looking to mitigate their own climate greenhouse gas emissions and really help in their own transformations, the products of chemistry will really have a significant piece there. So a number of innovations coming out of all of our companies, big and small. A number of them, like CCC in Ontario, have created already carbon neutral footprints. And so there's a lot of, what that means is that their products then are carbon neutral products that are then providing Canada with a great trade advantage in terms of the products it's able to deliver and helping to deliver products for other sectors as well. So lots of really interesting innovations taking place there, and that we'll see help to generate a great economic recovery post-COVID.
That's great. Thank you, Isabelle. Bob, maybe if you want to tell us a bit about the new technologies, because we talked about CCS, but I guess there are new innovations or technologies that your industry is investing in to succeed in a low carbon economy.
Yeah, I think one of them that it's not well known is before everyone understands about putting ethanol in gasoline, for example, you know, you see those up to 10%. But one of the things that's kind of new is we can actually put renewable feedstock, either canola, waste residue, right at the refinery. And that's called co-processing, which means when it comes out of the refinery, it works the same in your car, in your truck, or whatever. You don't see a difference in it. And that's something new in the last 2 or 3 years. And you're going to see a lot more investment in this type of technology called co-processing. The last one, people know about it, but it's an infrastructure issue, is hydrogen. I think, Pierre, you've mentioned it, but I can't stress enough with the people listening, when I said infrastructure, it's important. From our role, looking at consumers, you know, you hear about there's not enough gas station with hydrogen, for example, or the charging stations or all this. So even though we can make, so the innovation sometimes, Miguel, is not only about making a product, it's how do you get it to market? That innovation has to continue to exceed. And you hear about the chicken and the egg, and you hear all about that stuff, right? So for me, I want to stress a lot with the person is we may have some solution, it's just how do you get it to the market? How do you make sure people know about it and it's economical, right? So that's another type of innovation we're looking to continue to promote, I guess. You're on mute, Miguel.
Sorry for that.
It had to happen.
Exactly, that had to happen. Never happens, but now in a panel, it had to happen. So now I guess we're done with the questions to the panelists. We can jump to the Q&A from the public. So feel free to ask questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I already have a few questions. So we can start with a question from Robert Mitchell. Electrification of transport requires mining and oil and gas. Considering this, how much does each industry need to work with others in order to produce a true net zero product using full life cycle analysis? I think that's a great question. So I will let any one of you who want to answer the question start.
I don't know, Pierre, for me, how much do we need to work together? It's absolutely critical, Miguel. There's nothing I can do on my side that won't influence. And there's so many examples. I mean, I know, Isabelle, we've talked about natural gas and how clean it is. And if you put hydrogen in there, what does it mean to your sector? So I'm impacted. I need Kate to have sustainable forest management because from a CI or carbon intensity perspective, for my fuel to be lower, we need to make sure the forestry sector does the sustainable aspect of it, right? I mean, same thing with Pierre. I need to provide him with low carbon fuel. So if he's producing minerals, he can lower his carbon intensity. So I think we all need to work together. But the one thing I will add is not just industry working together. We need governments. And when I mean by governments, I mean federal, provincial, but also within Environment Canada, Natural Resource Canada, Foreign Affairs. You know, we're dealing with 6, 7, 8 different departments on this climate file and aligning all of our sectors and aligning the government policies. It's a challenge. I think we need to get it done, but I will start with that. So I'm sorry I'm not more clear, but we need to work together.
I think that's absolutely the case. One of the exciting things, actually, from a job perspective of the last couple of years is, you know, my colleagues and I at MAC, we're now working often with and regularly with the auto sector. I don't think I spent the first 18 years at MAC never once having talked to the auto sector. Now we're on panels together. We're collaborating on all sorts of fronts, but not just the auto sector, but also the suppliers to the auto sector. That whole value chain requires us all to work together. To Bob's point, I mean, we need if we want to lower our carbon footprint, we want access to these vehicles, they have to come from somewhere. And we're not the ones that are in the business of manufacturing these vehicles. We can provide the market pull, but we need them built by people who know how to build them. And they, of course, then, need the metals to build them with. And so it's kind of a virtuous cycle that we're in, but we all have to work very, very closely together if we're going to pull this off. We were pretty excited I guess it was which budget was it? I think the one before the pandemic, when the government extended the accelerated capital cost allowance for electric mine vehicles, which was something that had been not included in the first, the first set, I think, of enticements for electrification. I remember being in the audience when that was announced, and I was sitting with, a guy from McLean Engineering, whose company makes these vehicles, and he was over the moon, because that again provides more market pull. And if you've got more customers, they can build more, the costs go down, because when you're making more, there's all sorts of economies of scale that come into it, and things just accelerate. But that definitely, there's a role for government in this through a whole suite of measures to help accelerate the pace. Yeah. And also to help bring us all together, so that we are working together to find these solutions and deploy them. Right. I mean, Bob, you touched on a really important point. It's one thing to say you're going to convert to hydrogen, but if there's no place to get your hydrogen, because we haven't got the infrastructure set up across the country, it doesn't get you very far. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of movement around, plug-in cars. The infrastructure is starting to emerge. Yeah. And the government's committed to taking that further, which is great, but we've got a ways to go still.
Right. And Bob and Pierre are absolutely right. We must work closely together, and our members are working really closely with the auto sector as well in terms of the inputs, not only to those the batteries, but also to the lightweighting of the vehicles themselves. And I know Kate Forestry is also working closely with a number of key auto suppliers as well in terms of your products.
For sure. And we're even looking at modal shifts, right? Whether it's truck to rail or to electric logging trucks. And that's being piloted right now on Vancouver Island. So anyway, lots of great collaboration opportunities, but absolutely agree with the other panelists that, and I would say, although it's not as directly related to electrification and transportation, but initiatives like the government's Greening Government initiative, where it's their procurement, because the government of Canada is actually the largest procurer of goods, and so things like aviation fuel and all of these things, and they're looking at having, some of the best LCA methodology, and we encourage them to continue work on that, because it is important and speaks to the ability to compare those life cycle analyses across different materials. And then I think where we have the opportunity to showcase what's being developed and made in Canada is really exciting. So.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. We have another question from Lindsay Redekup. What are your industries doing for collaboration with Indigenous peoples and for compensation?
I'm happy to start. So the forest products sector, forestry, has been working with Indigenous peoples for a long time. I think maybe second to mining as far as the amount of Indigenous peoples that working in the sector. There's also 1,400 Indigenous owned businesses that are part of Canada's forest sector. And also just the unique relationship between Indigenous peoples and forests in Canada, which we recognize. And the big move is actually, managing forests with Indigenous peoples. The Quebec government and the Cree government have, the Pays des Braves agreement, which helps mandate the Cree values into forest management. There's lots of joint ventures, limited partnerships, Indigenous owned forest management companies in Canada. And we're seeing just more and more of that. And I think one of the opportunities moving forward is the innovation bioeconomy, for communities to be able to get in at the ground floor. Given the forest sector is a long established sector, I think that innovation bioeconomy, renewables is somewhere where more conversations, more partnerships are being looked at. But those are some of the ways in which there's more participation, and we're excited to see that increase in participation moving forward.
From a mining perspective, I would just say it's inconceivable today to imagine a new mine being built without partnerships with local Indigenous communities. There's now over 500 agreements between the mining companies and Indigenous communities across the country. It's just kind of a way of doing business, and it's well understood and accepted, such that we are now, I think, on a proportional basis, the largest employer and perhaps one of the largest procurers of Indigenous businesses alongside forestry. We also, it's worth mentioning too, Isabelle, you mentioned responsible care. We have a similar initiative in mining that we actually developed, inspired by responsible care, many years ago, called Towards Sustainable Mining. It's been in place now as a condition of MAC membership for over 15 years, and it's now, like responsible care, being exported around the world, which is great. Nice to see Canadian leadership being adopted globally. But embedded in TSM is an Indigenous and community protocol, which calls upon mine sites to work to achieve the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples before proceeding with the project. It calls for all sorts of measures around environmental monitoring, around cultural awareness and sensitivity training, a range of different commitments to ensure that we do work respectfully with our Indigenous neighbors and friends. It's just the way we work today, and the way we have to work today. And it's good business too. I mean, it's for a sector like forestry and mining, it has to be said, given where we're located, if we're not working with Indigenous people, we would be bypassing some of the most important labor pools we have and suppliers of goods and services. So why wouldn't you? It just makes the most sense.
Yeah, and to build on that, certainly around responsible care, we have 152 codes. Part of our codes, we have 152 elements that are third-party verified every 3 years for each of our companies, and embedded in that are codes around Indigenous engagement, particularly for our accountability code that really takes into account how companies engage with their employees, but also engage with the communities surrounding them, and the elements around cultural sensitivity, but also around capacity building are incredibly important, similar to what Pierre has highlighted. There really is the perspectives that are provided as well in terms of that sharing is critical in terms of making these companies better places to work, but better community-minded organizations as well, better neighbors.
Perfect. Thank you all for your answers. So we are 5 minutes away from the end of the panel. I guess the right thing to do right now would be to end with our concluding remarks. So I can let you all say a few words about maybe the future of your industry in this low carbon economy. And if you have other things to add for our participants, you can do so. So maybe we want to start with Bob.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miguel. And in a quick minute, I think we're full out into the transformation of the energy transportation system. I'm very excited. The next 30 years are going to be exciting for everyone. In the short term, and I'm talking next year, is going to be critical on implementation of some of the federal government and provincial government's climate plans. And I think, Miguel, we're looking at the clean fuel regulation. We're looking at the ICE vehicle mandates. We're looking at the carbon border adjustments. So there's a lot going on that will set the tone and set the investments and the rules, if you wish, for the next 10 to 15 years. And those are critical that they happen in 2022. I think every year we wait. The clean fuel regulation, we started in 2015 and it's 2021 and we're not quite there yet. So very exciting to start implementing everything that's been announced and getting to net zero. So that's the message I would say. And partnership is key for us. I think, Pierre, you raised it. 10 years ago, we weren't talking to the automotive. 10 years ago, we weren't having the same conversation with forestry that we're having right now. So I think very excited about that.
Thank you, Bob. Isabelle?
I would echo a lot of what Bob said in terms of those regulations and those key transformation pieces. Chemistry is it really is at the nexus of all of those solutions that help to enable clean energy and help to enable net zero and circular economy. And certainly we are there to help provide those inputs for the transformation. I would argue that industry has to be at the table for all of these initiatives, and no matter what industry. The federal government has had some really tremendous supports around net zero activations and supplying billions of dollars. But in order to transform just one plant in our sector, it can take all of that budget to transform the one plant. So creating those investment conditions that really allow our companies that compete internationally for those investment dollars, often within their own companies, is crucial, because it is those dollars that will allow us to accelerate that transformation. So opportunities around CCUS tax credits and other really sort of creative approaches to attracting that investment. We're not asking for money per se, we're just asking for investment conditions that will allow us to bring the money in.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Kate?
Thanks, Miguel. Yeah, I think I'll just end on two big things for us. One is mass timber. So this is engineered wood, which is now being used in tall wood buildings in Canada, and we're producing it here in Canada. We've got lots of great companies, one in Quebec called Nordic Structures, and others in Ontario and Alberta and BC. And this product has the ability to store carbon in the built environment. It also has the ability to displace more energy intensive building materials. So it's really exciting, and it happens to be really beautiful and something that is intended to store carbon for the long term. And the other one I would say is something called climate smart forestry. So as we conduct forest management in Canada, ensuring that we are helping Canada adapt to climate change, knowing that we're going to face more impacts of forest fires and flooding and things like that. So it's a big role that we take very seriously, but active forest management is a great tool moving forward. And I'll end there, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Pierre?
Yeah, I would just make the point, I think that while I think Canada's well positioned, while I think the federal government has put in place the building blocks for an effective strategy to address climate change, we've got a long way to go. And for our sector, the mines to mobility challenge is huge. We produce nickel and cobalt today, but we don't actually produce the right nickel for batteries. We don't have a nickel sulfate plant in Canada. We need to build one. We need one. Where's it going to come from? So we need to entice the kinds of investments into our sector if we're actually going to support the automotive sector that's such a critical piece of the Canadian economy. So there's lots ahead of us, and it's complex. And one thing we haven't touched on is the geopolitical nature of it. As we've all experienced through the pandemic, the supply shocks that we've experienced, not having enough masks, not being able to procure vaccines, We're extremely reliant on China for rare earth metals, and that is making the Americans and the Europeans and the Canadians very uncomfortable. So we need to start figuring out ways to source materials and to lessen that dependence going forward. This is a big undertaking, and it's not going to happen just by sitting back and, you know, hoping market forces will deliver, because they won't. It's going to require real strategy. I'm optimistic that the ingredients are there. The strategy is being thought through, but it's going to require a lot of effort, and we're going to have to pick up the pace.
Excellent. Thank you, Pierre. Well, I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists that came here today with us, and also thank you to all the participants that came to this panel. Please feel free to visit the association's websites. Also, you can visit the MEI's website. We have a lot of publications about this, and I'm pretty sure that the associations is the same thing with you all. So thank you all for joining us, and I wish you all a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel.
Take care.
Thanks for the invitation. Pleasure to be with you.